In a grocery store, a boy picked up a bag of chips from the shelf, but it turned out the bag was already open. As he tried to collect the chips from the floor, another child asked if he was trying to steal them, but he said no. Suddenly, a breaking news alert on the TV announced a small earthquake that was getting worse. The store's floor started shaking, causing panic among the people. Then, the ground in front of the store cracked open, sending rocks and sand tumbling down on everyone, filling the store with screams. The boy shielded the child next to him. After things settled down, they checked on each other's safety. When the boy stood up, the child noticed something strange behind him. She pointed, and the boy turned to see a massive tower rising from the ground in the city. This strange tower didn't just appear in their city. It popped up in cities around the world, like England and Japan. These towers were called the Towers of Nightmare. They started choosing people to enter and become tower walkers. Those who agreed were transported to a battlefield, where they received tools and powers like in a video game. However, as they spent more time inside the tower, they came to a sudden realization: this was no game. Instead, they were faced with a massive screen showing what was happening just outside the tower, a rescue operation underway, and a notification warning them that the tower was about to impact something significant. Outside the tower, a team of rescue workers was busy clearing the area. Suddenly, one of them noticed something strange inside the tower and alerted their colleagues. They weren't sure if it was a human or some kind of monstrous creature, so they decided to call the police. Then, out of nowhere, this creature clenched its fists and revealed its sharp teeth by opening its mouth. In an instant, the creature let out a piercing cry, and a horde of monsters poured out of the tower onto the Earth's surface, causing a catastrophic event now known as the Great Disaster. Alarm bells began ringing, signaling an emergency, and people scattered in all directions, desperately trying to save themselves. The military was called in to deal with this unexpected attack. They used tanks and heavy weapons to try and fight the monsters. However, these creatures were so massive and powerful that they wiped out the entire military force almost instantly. This resulted in widespread destruction, and a third of the world's population was wiped out. Inside the tower, there was nothing they could do but watch the devastation unfold. After the disaster, they received a notification that they had been chosen as tower walkers, the only hope to save the world from further destruction. With the possibility of saving the world in mind, they decided to climb the tower, hoping that clearing it would end this nightmare. In this way, people with special powers and unique abilities became humanity's last chance. To achieve their goal, the tower walkers started ascending the tower, floor by floor. After a few floors, they encountered a massive stone blocking their way to the next level, leaving them to wonder if they could progress any further. They thought about destroying the stone but decided that using force wouldn't be effective. Despite this, they attempted to do so with their weapons. However, when they started hitting the stone, it unexpectedly broke into small, shining pieces, leaving them puzzled. The system then explained that it was a regression stone, capable of sending them back to the time they were initially brought here while keeping their memories intact. Considering it an amazing discovery, the leader of the tower walkers took hold of it and said he'd try it on himself and report back. As he activated the stone, a bright light surrounded him, forcing the others to shield their eyes. After a while, when they looked again, they were shocked to see that their leader had truly disappeared. With their leader gone, the rest of the team wondered if he could ever return to the tower. At that moment, one of their members, a former science professor, suggested that things in the tower might be more complicated than they thought. He explained that their leader had gone back to the past of this world, but because of some timeline split, he might not be able to meet them again. He backed up his argument with popular theories like the multiverse and parallel universes, showing that their situation resulted from a split in the timeline of the universe. In simpler terms, he meant that their leader, by going back in time, had become a completely different person from the leader they knew. Upon hearing this, the other team members struggled to believe it, prompting him to realize they needed a simpler explanation. In plain language, he clarified that their leader had gone back in time, but that wouldn't change anything in their world. He believed that, based on what he knew, the items in the tower possessed such extraordinary powers. Holding the regression stone, he explained that it would send all of them to a world with a split timeline, but they might not all end up in the same split timeline. He was convinced that the tower's contents defied common human understanding. Meanwhile, outside the tower, the second tower impact occurred, leading to another deadly attack by monsters that further devastated humanity. The walkers faced a critical choice as Earth's human population neared extinction. They had to decide whether to use regression stones to go back in time for their own survival or to stay and fight in the tower until the end. At first, they bravely battled the monsters, but it became clear they were outmatched. They started using regression stones one by one, returning to the past. Eventually, only one walker remained in the tower, abandoned by the others who thought there was no hope. Feeling hopeless, the last walker sat in front of a powerful monster, ready to be consumed. Suddenly, a strong person appeared and defeated the monster in an instant. The newcomer asked if the walker was okay, and they nodded. Then, a group of powerful individuals approached, led by the person who had saved the walker. They praised the walker for holding on until the end. Realizing these people were their last hope, the walker used a regression stone and went back in time, believing that such strong individuals wouldn't be tempted to use the stones. After the walker disappeared, the captain of the group told the others to keep going, leading humanity's last, determined squad called the Carpe Diem. Despite their strength and determination, the squad was eventually defeated, and its members were in near-death states. As the captain lay pinned beneath rubble, he wondered where they had gone wrong. He remembered a recent battle where a giant scarecrow-like monster had attacked. The captain, Jae-hwan, had attacked from behind, cutting off its head with his sword while Yoon-hwan, his friend, had used his weapons to destroy the rest of its body. After vanquishing the monster, he turned to Yoon-hwan and asked if there were any casualties. Yoon-hwan reassured him that everyone was okay, and the wounded squad members just needed some rest to recover. They all looked at their fellow team members and, feeling hopeful, Yoon-hwan remarked that if they kept going like this, they might make it to the final floor. Their team members happily waved in agreement. While waving back, Jae-hwan suddenly noticed a remarkable sword on the ground. It was a sun and moon imbued suppression dragon sword, forged over 1,000 days by the 85th floor master to kill a dragon. Jae-hwan felt a rush of excitement at having such a powerful weapon. He thought, like Yoon-hwan had said, that they were on the right track to reach the final floor soon. Until that moment, Jae-hwan had believed that luck was on their side. However, when they reached the Chamber of Purgatory on the 98th floor, they faced an overwhelmingly powerful monster. This creature spewed molten lava and seriously injured all his comrades, melting their weapons. As he watched his squad's dire situation, the monster threw him against a wall, causing immense pain. As he began to lose consciousness, Jae-hwan wondered if it was all in vain. He thought about his team members and his friend Yoon-hwan, and questioned if their shared experiences were meant to end like this. Just then, the monster prepared to unleash a stream of lava. But before it could do so, Yoon-hwan suddenly appeared and attacked the monster, causing it intense agony. Yoon-hwan urged Jae-hwan to stay focused, then landed on the monster's body and tried to hold it down, admitting he couldn't defeat it alone. In response, the monster turned its fury toward Yoon-hwan, leaving Jae-hwan stunned. After a tense moment, Yoon-hwan dropped his weapons and clung to the monster's sharp horn, perilously close to being consumed. Shocked and worried for Yoon-hwan, Jae-hwan called out, but before he could fully regain his senses, the monster abruptly turned and rammed its horn into the opposite wall. Seeing this, Jae-hwan was overwhelmed by anger. He got up, grabbed the sword, and charged at the monster with a fierce determination in his eyes. Feeling a sudden movement behind it, the monster turned around. But before it could react, Jae-hwan rushed toward it with incredible speed and launched an attack. After a while, the monster lay in pieces on the ground, with molten lava flowing from its shattered body. Struggling to catch his breath, Jae-hwan turned to Yoon-hwan and told him to continue. However, Yoon-hwan was on the ground, badly hurt, holding a regression stone. Seeing this, Jae-hwan asked him what he was doing, and Yoon-hwan apologized. Jae-hwan remembered Yoon-hwan as someone who always smiled, even in this dangerous tower. That's why everyone called him the Smile Knight among the tower walkers. Realizing that the Smile Knight had lost his smile for the first time, Jae-hwan turned away, telling him to use the regression stone before he changed his mind. With that, he started to walk away, leaving Yoon-hwan behind. Looking at Jae-hwan, Yoon-hwan wondered if Jae-hwan had figured out his plan. He glanced at the bloodstained stone in his hand, commenting that it looked rather worn. However, Yoon-hwan had a change of heart and began to climb the stairs, thinking that Jae-hwan was even more impressive than he thought and that he could reach the top floor of the tower. Despite his serious injuries, Yoon-hwan was determined to keep moving, believing that someone like Jae-hwan could make it. Standing by a window, he expressed relief at having Jae-hwan in this world and then jumped out. Meanwhile, Jae-hwan reached the entrance to the 99th floor and was about to open the door when leaves started falling on him. These leaves signaled what his friend had done, causing Jaehwan to pause for a moment. He then said they should continue forward together. With determination, he opened the door to the 99th floor and was surprised to find a snowy landscape in front of him. This made him realize that the challenges ahead would be very different. As he entered the snowy area, Jaehwan started moving forward, feeling the cold and exhaustion. Suddenly, sharp spikes of ice began to emerge from the ground, forcing Jaehwan to run to avoid them. While he was running away, enduring a great deal of pain, a dragon-like ice monster emerged from the ground and asked if he had given up. Despite his injuries from the snow spikes, Jaehwan stood before it, smiling, and asked if the monster was tired from their fight. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the snowy landscape, signaling the start of a fierce battle between Jaehwan and the monster. After some time, Jaehwan hid beneath the frozen bodies of gigantic monsters, muffling his breath with a piece of cloth to remain silent. Meanwhile, the monsters searched for him, playfully asking if they were playing hide and seek. As he remained still, Jaehwan realized that it had been a decade since he had reached the 99th floor. While applying medicine to his injured hand, he thought about the challenges he had faced on the 98th floor, acknowledging that the danger on this floor was unlike anything he had encountered before. His injuries caused him immense pain, and he knew that the 99th floor boss, the Ice Dragon, possessed a breath that came from the Forgotten Land. This breath was nearly impossible to withstand, even with the highest level of cold resistance. He believed that the only reason he had survived for so long was the equipment left behind by the walkers who had regressed. He remembered the dragon's sword of suppression he had found on the 85th floor and the ice demon armor given to him by Yunhuan. Looking at the Flame King's bracelet given to him by his friend Han Seal, Jaehwan closed his eyes and missed them all. Remembering Seal, he silently apologized for not being able to save her and wished he had been stronger. Just then, someone called out to him, and he was shocked. He found himself in a memory where a blacksmith asked if he was thinking of challenging the tower again, and Jaehwan agreed, stating that he felt he could conquer the tower this time. The blacksmith, Jae, belonged to Oedipu's village, which had been reclaimed after defeating the boss on the 50th floor, Altamyanus. Despite the constant influx of injured or dead walkers, the people in the area remained hopeful. The priests organized rescue teams to help walkers who couldn't fight anymore. Meanwhile, blacksmiths in the workshops made gear for walkers who continued to battle for humanity, offering it for free. Looking at Jaehwan noted that he might be the last blacksmith in Oedipus. Jae, in response, discouraged Jaehwan from dwelling on this fact. He pointed out that Jaehwan was his only customer, and supplies from the lower floors were scarce nowadays. Jaehwan understood this, as there were very few living humans left in the tower to send supplies. While Jaehwan didn't know the current year, he remembered at least 10 tower impacts and that new people weren't being invited into the tower anymore. Thinking about this, he asked Jae if humans had completely disappeared from Earth. After a short silence, Jae asked Jaehwan if he ever got tired of going up and down the tower repeatedly. Jaehwan remembered a strange message on the wall near the regression stone, "Tower within the tower, a nightmare within a nightmare." Not sure of its meaning and thinking someone else might have written it, Jaehwan scratched his head and said there was nothing special inside. Jae then mentioned that Grandma Hyline had disappeared 2 days ago, which surprised Jaehwan. He believed people could only vanish from the tower by going back in time or by jumping off it. Knowing that Hyline, a skilled potion maker, and Jae, a talented blacksmith, were among the few support walkers left, Jaehwan turned to Jae and asked him to teach him blacksmithing, leaving Jae shocked. Thinking back on his conversation with Jae, Jaehwan left his hiding place and confidently faced the ice dragon when it asked if he was done playing hide and seek. The dragon acknowledged that no human had ever reached the 99th floor alone since the tower's creation, recognizing Jaehwan as an extraordinary human. Jaehwan continued to smile confidently. Jaehwan had a shocking realization: the creature before him was no human but a monstrous beast. Slowly, he opened his eyes and turned to face the massive dragon. He mustered the courage to speak, saying he'd feel a deep emptiness after defeating such a fearsome opponent. The dragon responded with a wry smile, claiming Jaehwan's goal was impossible. Ignoring the dragon's skepticism, Jaehwan drew his sword, suggesting the dragon wasn't as invulnerable as it thought. He boldly stated that even the dragon's supposedly impenetrable icy armor had started to crack. In response, the dragon called him arrogant, and then unleashed a deadly breath attack, aiming it directly at Jaehwan. Fearlessly, Jaehwan ran toward the impending danger. After a relentless battle in the snowy field, Jae-hwan lay in the snow, his body covered in wounds and blood. The dragon stood over him, mocking his determination to fight to the end. The dragon foretold Jae-hwan's ultimate fate of overwhelming solitude and nothingness. Suddenly, the snow spikes that held Jae-hwan transformed into the shapes of his fallen comrades, embracing him and calling his name. In a moment of defiance, Jae-hwan addressed the dragon, opened his eyes, and chided it for talking too much. With determination, he shattered the snow spikes and charged at the bewildered dragon with his sword. The dragon urged Jae-hwan to give up, claiming his skills weren't sufficient to defeat it. However, Jae-hwan remembered that he'd started his tower raid later than others, missing out on hidden skills and classes. As a result, he had focused solely on perfecting the thrust skill, practicing it tirelessly. He had killed over 50 million monsters with it, and it had become a powerful attack rivaling hidden skills, without draining his spirit power. But facing the formidable ice dragon, he knew the battle would be tough. Over 100 thrusts had barely left a scratch on its body. Suddenly, the dragon opened its mouth, preparing a powerful breath attack. Jae-hwan realized it was too late to dodge. Then he noticed a familiar light emanating from the dragon, just as he'd seen on the 98th floor. He saw this as his chance. Jae-hwan gripped his sword tightly and charged at the dragon with all his might, inflicting a fatal blow. As he landed on the ground, he looked at the dragon. Its lower jaw hung loose, one side of its face completely destroyed, yet it seethed with anger. Jae-hwan smiled, saying his attacks hadn't been enough. He should have obliterated the dragon's chin. In response, the dragon unfurled huge icy wings and warned Jae-hwan not to get carried away after just one strike. The dragon had grown even more powerful and took to the skies, declaring its intent to finish off Jae-hwan this time. It unleashed a powerful breath that forced Jae-hwan to dodge hastily, filled with anxiety at the thought that he might not win if the battle continued this way. Then, unexpectedly, the dragon landed in front of Jae-hwan, calling him an unfortunate human. It mentioned that if there were 10 more humans like Jae-hwan, they might have had a chance to defeat it. The dragon also revealed that their fate would have been different if its race hadn't been fooled by the Dream Demon's stone, which left Jae-hwan puzzled. Confused about this stone, Jae-hwan asked for more information. However, instead of answering, the dragon raised its claw to strike him. Jae-hwan managed to evade the attack and fled the snowy battlefield. Safely outside, he closed the door behind him, realizing that the dragon's last attack could have killed him. As Jae-hwan rested against the door, he reflected on the dragon's words about the Dream Demon's stone. 5 years later, Jae-hwan achieved the seemingly impossible. He defeated the ice dragon and reached the 99th floor. This victory greatly enhanced his strength, stamina, skills, martial abilities, and dexterity. Sitting beside the ice dragon's lifeless body, Jae-hwan reviewed the notifications on his device. He then turned to the dying dragon and asked about the Dream Demon's stone. The dragon cryptically replied that Jae-hwan already possessed the answers and that he would learn everything on the final floor. At that moment, a unique sword descended from the dragon's body, covered in its blood, the ice dragon's sword infused with its icy breath. As Jae-hwan held the peculiar-looking sword, he couldn't help but think it looked more like a dagger. Suddenly, the dragon's spilled blood on the snow formed a door in front of him, leading him to the ultimate floor. Determined to conquer the tower, Jae-hwan entered the portal. The inscription on the door changed from 100 to Control Room. Moments after entering the door, Jae-hwan emerged on the other side, greeted by a shocking sight, countless screens displaying himself, Jae, Hylene, Adipose, and his village. He stared at the screens, contemplating whether this represented the current appearance of the tower. His focus shifted between the summoning area and his village. Lost in thought, a voice suddenly broke in, expressing surprise that he had arrived here first, while they had expected him to head to town. Startled, he spun around, his hand gripping his sword tightly. However, there was no one to be seen. The voice quickly reassured him, admitting they had forgotten to deliver an important message. At that very moment, Jae-hwan received a notification, congratulating him for being the first to clear the tutorial game of World 294. Reading it, Jae-hwan was overwhelmed with shock and confusion. Suddenly, the blood of all the people who had died in the tower began to fill the room, transforming into a strange, water-like substance, intensifying his shock. The invisible being that had been conversing with him stepped out of a window, hoping Jae-hwan wouldn't get too overwhelmed. The liquid began to surge like a storm, and when the figure finally emerged, he commented that Jae-hwan seemed on the verge of drowning in his own emotions. A peculiar creature, clad in a suit, remarked that it was a bit late to warn him about the danger, but encouraged him not to be too distressed, considering how well he had managed, being a human and all. Meanwhile, the transparent blood rained down on him like enormous droplets. However, the creature was surprised to observe that the blood didn't touch Jaehwan's body. Instead, it formed a protective shield around him. Witnessing Jaehwan standing unharmed amidst this torrent of blood, the creature noted that he had bounced back faster than anticipated. Jaehwan turned to the creature and asked who it was. In response, the creature explained that they had skipped introductions out of excitement at meeting someone who had reached the 100th floor of the tower. It then revealed itself as the devil, known as Beast Rain, the owner of the Tower of Nightmares that Jaehwan had just conquered. Hearing this, Jaehwan asked if there was more to come after this tower, considering it had seemed like a tutorial. The creature chuckled, complimenting his astuteness, and mentioned that before the main event, there was something it wanted Jaehwan to see. With a snap of its fingers, numerous screens appeared before him. On these screens, Jaehwan witnessed his entire journey, from entering the tower to forming his team and encountering various individuals as they climbed the floors. As he looked at these familiar faces, the devil remarked on their significance and the fact that he wouldn't encounter them again. Jaehwan also relived the memory of battling dragon-like creatures alongside Seal, a fight that had ended tragically with Seal's death, leaving him in tears. Next came the memory of Yunwan's death, which overwhelmed him. After sharing these memories, the devil inquired whether they didn't evoke sadness, anger, and regret. Encouraging him to leave behind these pointless emotions, the devil offered Jaehwan a fresh opportunity, inviting him to replay the game once more. The devil considered it an incredible privilege, similar to what novel heroes experience starting anew with all their memories intact. Jaehwan began to realize that this wasn't the end, and that saving humanity meant more than just reaching the top of the tower. He remembered the initial invitation to the tower, supposedly for humanity's rescue, and it struck him that they'd been deceived from the beginning. No matter what they tried, they couldn't stop the tower's impending disaster. All they could do was try to conquer it. The idea of saving humanity was just wishful thinking. With this in mind, Jaehwan turned to the devil and firmly said that they knew he could never send them back to the past. The devil burst into laughter, mocking Jaehwan for holding on to the idea of going back in time. Then, he dropped a bombshell: nothing in the tower, no matter how powerful, could send anyone back in time. This revelation shocked Jaehwan, who had initially argued that there was a regression stone in the tower capable of such a feat. But then, Jaehwan remembered the words of the ice dragon about the demon dreamstone and realized it referred to the regression stones. The devil confirmed that it wasn't a regression stone but a nightmare stone. People who used it didn't go back in time, they got trapped in a dream created by the stone. The devil had devised the idea for this item on the 77th floor when he noticed a group fixated on going back in time. Jaehwan took some time to process this information and decided to trust whatever he was told. After a while, the devil asked if they should start the main game and sent a notification inviting Jaehwan to join, expecting him to accept. But to the devil's surprise, Jaehwan instantly declined the notification. He declared that the devil had helped him realize the true nature of the tower. Jaehwan believed that he was already trapped in a nightmare created by the tower and refused to stay in it any longer. Instead, he made it clear that he intended to hunt down the devil and keep climbing to the next floor, just as he had been doing. When Jaehwan announced his plan to kill the devil and move on to the next floor, Beast Rain confidently stated that there was nothing beyond the 100th floor, that's where the tower ended. However, Jaehwan remained resolute, refusing to believe the devil. The devil, anxious to convince Jaehwan, tried to reason with him, but Jaehwan responded by swiftly beheading the devil with his sword. With his head detached, the devil asked Jaehwan what he desired, offering anything as a reward for his actions. Jaehwan calmly replied that he didn't desire anything. In response, the devil, as his head began to reappear, asked if Jaehwan didn't want to return to his original world. The devil explained that the tower and its impact on the world were just a dream. This revelation shocked Jaehwan, and screens appeared, showing him what was happening in the real world. He saw people going about their daily lives, looking perfectly normal, and realized that Beast Rain was telling the truth. Meanwhile, Beast Rain laughed at Jaehwan's reaction, saying he seemed to understand his situation. He asked if Jaehwan wasn't relieved to know that nobody had actually died. Then, Beast Rain remembered to show Jaehwan something important and directed his attention to a screen displaying many unconscious patients. As Jae-hwan looked closer, he realized one of them was himself. Beast Rain asked if Jae-hwan was surprised by his unharmed appearance. Beast Rain revealed that even though decades had passed in the tower, only a month had passed in the real world. After showing him the screens, Beast Rain stated that Jae-hwan could never defeat him because the power gap between them was immense, like the difference between humans and dragons. Jae-hwan, feeling a sense of relief, gripped his sword again, declaring that if Beast Rain was like a dragon, he had already hunted one before. He bravely charged toward the devil, sword in hand, fully committed to ending the evil being's life. Sometime later, Jae-hwan, heavily injured, stumbled into Jae's workshop and called out for him. To his surprise, the workshop was covered in thick cobwebs, as if it hadn't been used in a very long time, and Jae was nowhere to be found. Realizing that he couldn't rely on Jae's help, Jae-hwan decided to forge a weapon himself. It had been 72 days since he had confronted Beast Rain, and despite his best efforts, he couldn't land a single blow on the devil. What was even more bewildering was that Beast Rain didn't seem interested in killing him either, almost as if he were playing with him. This strange situation only fueled Jae-hwan's determination to defeat the devil, no matter how long it took. Meanwhile, Beast Rain, watching Jae-hwan closely on his screens, was intrigued by how unique Jae-hwan was. He, as a cultivator, had never seen anything quite like it. Beast Rain explained his process of selecting strong individuals from those who entered the tower, putting them through a tutorial stage, and then helping them grow during the actual tower gameplay. However, Jae-hwan's refusal to move on to the next stage presented a problem for Beast Rain. He considered just killing Jae-hwan within the tower, but that would harm Jae-hwan's soul due to the differences between them, causing problems with the harvesters. So, instead, he decided to carefully nurture Jae-hwan, sell him to a high-ranking devil, and repay his loan for the tower. As he watched Jae-hwan on his monitor, Beast Rain marveled at his uniqueness, even attracting the attention of divine beings who rarely interacted with devils. Yet, he found Jae-hwan's relentless pursuit of victory over him annoying and questioned why Jae-hwan kept resisting his offers to move forward in the game. Realizing that Jae-hwan wasn't going to give up, the devil disappeared with a snap of his fingers, leaving Jae-hwan surprised. After a moment, he reappeared behind Jae-hwan, who reacted by turning quickly and accidentally injuring himself against the wall. Growing increasingly frustrated, Beast Rain held Jae-hwan firmly and demanded to know why he was persistently pursuing a seemingly pointless goal, ignoring the rewards offered. Jae-hwan simply stated that he wanted to defeat the devil and move on to the next level, further frustrating Beast Rain. Seeing the devil's agitation, Jae-hwan smiled, thinking that he had finally pushed Beast Rain to his limit, and expressed his desire to ask a question. Sitting at a table, Beast Rain explained that the universe wasn't confined to a single dimension, a notion Jae-hwan agreed with, mentioning parallel universes and the multiverse on Earth. Beast Rain then went into more detail, revealing the existence of a primary dimensional realm called the Almighty Land, beneath which countless alternate dimensions thrived. Earth, he explained, was just a tiny planet within this complex dimensional system, referred to as the 294th world by their standards. He explained that inside the tower, the walkers used to gain skills and items while working on their status. This helped them adapt to the system of the Almighty Land and gave them a chance to travel to another world. He also mentioned that devils like him played a role in supporting these games. In response, Jae-hwan had asked why he, a devil, was involved in such activities. Intrigued, Beast Rain had then mentioned that he was curious about why Earth was chosen among all the possible alterations for the tower's impact. He wondered why he had been forced to face this fate. He had explained that it seemed like their planet had been chosen by chance, but Jae-hwan had interrupted him, expressing his interest in understanding why a devil was running the tower. This had surprised Beast Rain, who had stared at Jae-hwan. Jae-hwan continued by asking what benefit the devil derived from this kind of work. A bit nervously, Beast Rain had stated that it was like volunteer work for creatures like him. He had added that Jae-hwan didn't seem to believe him, but it was genuinely something that devils enjoyed doing. Beast Rain had gone on to explain that this kind of thing happened on many different planets, where devils watched over the walkers and lived in paradise alongside them. After giving a long-winded explanation and justification, Beast Rain remarked that Jae-hwan must have believed him until now. Jae-hwan had simply glared, considering it all pointless talk. After some time, Jae-hwan sat down in the snowfield, examining his status window. He had noticed that all his skills had reached their maximum level. While drinking a potion to heal his injuries, he realized that there were no more skills to level up. Yet, despite this, he still couldn't defeat Beast Rain. As he lay in the snow, he pondered whether humans could truly be reduced to nothing in the system of this strange world. Suddenly, he had felt something strange and had become surprised, wondering what it was. At that moment, he had started to see fine particles floating in the air, gradually growing larger. Initially, he had considered it a hallucination. However, as he held one of these particles in his hand, it quickly dissipated into the air, forming different shapes. While observing them, Jae-hwan had come to the conclusion that these particles represented the essence of this world, regardless of their form.